Good morning and welcome to Sunday. Here it is, the final day of working through the 9th chapter of the book of Hosea. And we're going to then be launching into some more Christmassy style of meditations as we go from the 14th onward through the month. Make it through Christmas. But we need to finish out this chapter of Hosea, and it is not a happy tune, but it helps us to understand really the background of desperation that sets the stage for the birth of Christ, the visit of the wise men, all of the great events of those 2.5 years that we find captured in the book of Matthew and Luke. But here we are in the return Hosea story, and we want to jump right in there. This is Hosea 9:16 and 17. He says, Ephraim is blighted. To be blighted. Whenever you see famine or you see locusts swarm through an area, what's left over is what's called blighted. There's no ability to sustain life. It is utterly wrecked. Ephraim is blighted. Their root is withered. So if the leaves of a plant are attacked, it can have an effective root system, but the rest of it up above the soil is under attack. God points out, remember, He always sees deeper than we see. He knows what's going on in the root of the matter. And He says, Ephraim is blighted, their root is withered, they yield no fruit. Now, what does Ephraim mean? Doubly fruitful. Wow. So here is a great irony, a great juxtaposition of two opposite ideas. The name Ephraim is a declaration by Joseph of how God had made him fruitful in the land of Egypt. But here, Ephraim is blighted in the land, Haaretz Israel, in the land of Israel. Ephraim finds itself as the prince leadership of the northern tribes. Ephraim is blighted, their root is withered, they yield no fruit, no ability to yield the fruit. Remember, the name of the firstborn son that actually belonged to Hosea was Yetzrael. Sounds very close to Itzrael. Yetzrael. God shall sow. In other words, God will plant the seed. He will bring it to fruition. It will be fruitful. So it's a prophetic statement over Israel. At the same time that Israel is getting into a horrible situation. It's blighted. The root is withered. They yield no fruit. This needs to be in the back of our minds that God has an overarching plan, and He is rich in mercy, and His grace is amazing, because we're looking at a realistic snapshot of a desperate situation that Israel finds itself in. He goes on to say, even if they bear children, I will slay their cherished offspring. They are not even going to, even if they bring forth fruit, it's going to be plucked away from them. It's going to be taken away from them. The comment by Hosea here is, my God will reject them because they have not obeyed Him. They will be wanderers among the nations. They will be wanderers amongst nations. Now, this very word wanderer occurs in Genesis. It shows up first, way back in the book of Genesis, and it connects to Cain. And what did he say? He would go away from God's presence from the garden, just outside the garden, away from awareness of God's presence, and he would be forced to be a wanderer in the earth. And the idea that he wouldn't have his own place, he would be dispossessed from that place which is his own because of the rejection of God. Because they have not obeyed him, they will be wanderers among the nations. Do you know that that was true of the people of Israel? A couple times in their history, they were about to be put out of their land and be in Assyria. The southern group would be in Babylon. The southern group would include all of the tribes, because some people would leave the northern area and go south. They'd migrate south. They would mix in with the southern tribes. They would go to Babylon for 70 years, then return. But the northern kingdom, they would go into Assyrian captivity. And from Assyrian captivity, they would find themselves spread out into other places in the earth. They would find themselves in what is modern day Russia, Germany, all around the Black Sea, up into the areas that were actually populated by the descendants of Japheth. They would find themselves having no land of their own. They would then have a native language of another people, and they would be utterly and completely separated from their inheritance in Israel. This would occur again after they were regathered into the land. Many of them did not come back. The southern tribes and those northern tribes that were connected into the southern tribes would come back from Babylon, and they would inhabit the land from 586 minus 70, about 516 BC, until 70 AD. So there would be about 600 years. They would once again be spread out into all of the world. They would not have their own land, and that would persist from 70 AD until 1948. And then they would come back into the land. There is still a regathering into the land, as actually more Jewish people live outside of Israel than live inside of Israel. It's believed that there's about 6 million back in the land, and there are at least 6 million in the United States, and there's probably another bunch scattered amongst still in Russia, Europe, and so on. But there is some regathering going on where even today people are coming out of the African nations and out of the European nations and finding their way back into Israel in the Aliyah, the return. So there is a return going on even now as we're speaking into the land of Israel. But this idea, my God will reject them because they have not obeyed him. They will be wanderers among the nations, which means he has displaced them from being his wife. He has not ended their life. He has displaced them from a place that he's working with them in order to sow into the earth. So how is he doing it right now? He is doing this through the ecclesia, through the church. But Paul teaches that there's going to be another regathering, and there's going to be a reinvigoration, and there is going to be a return to his purposes for Israel, and they're going to do it with all of their heart. I'll tell you what, I'm really looking forward to that. But until then, what can we do? We can avoid this kind of outcome. We can be a people who are fruitful, that we have deep roots. Remember what Psalm says, that those that do not walk in the way of the sinner sit in the seat of the scornful. But what they do is they are abiding by this water. They're planted by rivers of water, and they have a good root. Their leaves do not wither. Whatever they set their hand to prospers. These are those who meditate upon his law day and night. Those who are absolutely and completely sold out and dedicated to him. So against this background of being blighted, root withered, yielding no fruit, children rejected and slain. What a horrible situation. But that's the inevitable consequences of this people who have rejected the covenant of the living God. There's an answer for that, and that is to do the opposite. So today, let's focus on doing the opposite of that and giving Him our soul, our mind, our strength, going after Him and becoming fanatics for Yahweh, going after Him with all of our spirit, our soul, our mind, our strength, and focusing upon Him, turning to Him, and then returning to Him so that we can find out what it's like to have the favor of God upon our life in full effect. I don't know about you, but that's what I want to see happen. So as you meditate upon that today, the Lord bless you. Hope to see you tomorrow.